Welcome again to Studio 14's Overton County Magazine. I'm your host, Jerry Stovall. Overton County Magazine is a show designed to bring our viewers a look at some of the interesting as well as informative people and events occurring in and around Overton County. Some of our stories are videotaped on location, while still others will be brought to you straight from Studio 14. So why don't we all sit back, relax, and thumb through this week's magazine. In this segment tonight, we have with us Dempsie Webb and his collection of Indian artifacts, and hopefully he'll tell us a little bit about the history that goes along with them. Good to have you with us tonight.
Good to be here, Jerry.
Okay, on the Indians, what kind of Indians do we have in this area?
Well, what we had in this area, they called the Creek Indians, or Woodland Indians. This was mostly a hunting ground, and we had a few tribes around. And the Indians primarily lived up and down the creek, so they give them the name as Creek Indians. That's where they got the name Creek, because they lived around water. And, of course, they had no written history. The only things we can go by is artifacts they left behind and try to determine their lifestyle, their culture.
What time period were they in here?
I have artifacts here that dates back to the Archaic period on up to Paleo. That is periods that archaeologists name. Say Archaic was back before or during the Ice Age. And how they've determined that is they've found these projectile points with your woolly elephant and your prehistoric animal bones. They're associated where they've been embedded in with them. Then the Paleo period, which followed it, and then you have the Mississippian period and on down through the Woodland period, which was the period when pioneers, settlers came into this area. So, like I say, we had no written history. The only thing we can go by is this, and one man's speculation is good as other, really. But they have refined it down to they have a fairly accurate date on these.
Okay. What kind of settlements did they have?
Primarily in this area, they were in small groups, small bands when pioneers came into this area, because this was considered kind of a no man's land, because the warring parties from the west down Donaldson, Nashville, hunted in this area, and then the Cherokees from over in Knoxville area hunted in this area, and when they met, of course, these few arrows flew, and so you had bands like Nettlecarry up here, Chief Nettlecarry up by Alpine, and you had some out Parrot Cave, down on Sulphur Branch and around. You had a few little small settlements back then, but they'd primarily been run out or went and joined another band or some other area, because they was constantly in a fight with both sides. They had to fight in the back and front too.
Okay, now were they still around when the settlers started coming in?
Yeah, they was Indians in here. Of course, this is hearsay, but you had Chief Nettlecarry up here. Understand that his tribe, the way they disappeared is by marriage. Marrying in with settlers came into this area, and some of the people up in the Alpine area have a right smart Indian blood in them now.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And some down around Sulphur and in that area married in.
Okay, now you've got a collection of tools, I guess, that they might have used. Is that what these are?
Yeah, that what you have here, that's a grooved axe.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
That could be used in by the war parties, or also in their work in cutting a tree. Well, we think that they used a combination of burning and cutting to fall a tree, see.
Okay.
Of course, man would hate to cut his winter's wood with that. And you take the woman of the house, this is what she ground up, that's called a pestler. That's what she ground up the roots and anything like that, nuts and anything she wanted, herbs, and I suppose they pounded their meat with it. You see that little depression there where you could crack a nut with it?
Well, Okay, and they just take another rock.
Yeah, that was on it,
work
and you could pound that away, and also you could grind up.
What kind of rock is that? It looks more like some sort of marble or.
That's coming out of a river. That's a river slick. That one came from. I found that one over around the Hiwassee River over there. And right here's one that came from Mr. County. This is a hole. What they done their digging with. That's a chip hole there.
I'll be darned.
They chipped that out of one piece of stone.
How can you tell now that's pretty much what they use it for, just from the shape of it?
Yeah, well now in their hafting, they took a tree, it had a limb come out like that, put it right there and there.
Oh, okay.
And tied it around here. And you can see right here where and they were good at making a place for that limb to fit.
Well, how about that?
And here is one that I found when I was working over on Hiwassee. That's out of bluestone. That's a hole here. And here where they had their hafting strings here, you can see where they smooth that off there where it's been worn there to keep them cutting their leather. And so
okay.
They used it for the same thing. They were into some agriculture when that one was made there. This one's much older. I suppose that one was for maybe digging their graves or things like that. And this one here is what you call a celt. They split a piece like that, put that up in there and let it dry, and they wrapped it. And they used that for smoothing out the inside of their log canoes and things like that.
How would they actually shape the points on there? Do you have any sort of an idea?
They used a rough stone like that. They used another stone, and they ground it down with a stone just like you would in your tool work.
Well, it's got an awful fine edge on it.
They made things pretty symmetrical and not have anything to go by to gauge it with.
It does. It looks awful good.
Some of them are done some real good work, craft work, and this here is, I guess that is an elbow pipe. That's one of the worst things the Indians done to the settlers and the pioneer. Is introduced tobacco to it. So
it's hung around a long time.
It's hung around. That one came off Cherokee Lake over near Rogersville, and they had toys for their kids too. Here's a toy shelf. That's for a kid. I found two of them right close together.
Just a smaller version.
Yeah,
of this
that's
one
a small one there.
Okay.
And this right here, you know, there's always a demand, there's a supply. That's a genuine fake pipe.
Now what in the world?
That's supposed to be a rattlesnake coil around it.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
It's got two eyes. I don't know if let's see. Can we get a shot of that? Here's the two eyes right here of the rattlesnake. It coils around with the rattles on the end, and that is a pipe, actually.
Yeah.
How about that?
But that has been made by the modern man, and that is some kind of a gaming rock or something that they used.
How about that? You got a pretty good collection.
This is a quartz crystal. They used that, the woodland Indians. Of course, that's laid out on the ground, and it's kind of like soil, but dirt and anything. But when that come out of the crystal rock, you know, if you've ever seen a quartz crystal, they used them for kind of a looking glass. That was a good luck piece to them.
No.
Now, they had those whenever the first settlers come into this country. There's a few of them. You don't find too many of them. That's the only one I ever found.
Yeah.
And getting over into the points here. Now, here is some of the oldest points here. This is what you call a cumlin. This is native to this area here. that is fluted. It's got a chip knocked off all the way down on both sides. That is a very old point. These are Clovis points across here. They're fluted. They're back the late Archaic, early Paleo period. This is a fluted point here. Here are some old points across here which should have been fluted, but take this one here, the bridge they built up on it to flute off, it wouldn't come off right. I believe it's another one here. It's slivered off at an angle. There is a fluted one up there.
I'd say the grain of the stone probably had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, they did. They knew how to work that stone in order to make those flakes come off. But now you have people today that can make that. It's hard to tell.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you
and
mean
they're not Indians either.
Okay, you're talking about pretty much
they're faking them.
Yeah, counterfeits.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had a counterfeit somewhere, but I didn't know where it was. I didn't have it in with my real things, but average person couldn't tell it.
They would actually flute it for the cutting ability. Is that what it was?
Well, when I was a kid, only ones I ever seen with them, they said it was a blood groove. So it'd go in and the blood would come out and bleed whatever they shot to death. But it's not that. I don't know what the purpose of it was. Of course, they didn't leave any written history, and you don't know what it was for.
Some are long, and you got a real small one.
Yeah, that's just
no rhyme or reason to that.
No, I just added that into that collection. See, black, red, and to add a little different color to it.
Oh, okay. Well, how about that?
That is a fairly old point. Some of these are fairly old, but most of them are modern. These are the type of points that was used about the time the settlers came over here. Of course, these three up here are drills or awls. That's what they drilled their hole in. You take it. Well, if they made them a pipe in that, they had to have something that was a little bit harder, and so they used a quartz stone, and they chipped them out, and then sandstone stuff, they could put them a piece of wood on that, and they could drill a hole through it. This little point here, that's a sharp, almost it's a knife. I've always thought that they used that as some kind of a surgical instrument, maybe if they wanted to cut something out, because it is real sharp. And of course these are what they call bird points or war points. If they shot you with one of them, it would break off. I've seen a couple of Indian skulls had been dug up with these stones embedded in their skull, and they'd live several years after it, but I guess they had a bad headache because it growed back around them. And
okay, what's a characteristic? Just being sharp and small?
Well, they what they call Hamilton Point, and the tribes from the other areas feared the Indians of this area that used those Hamilton points because they were so deadly. They go in, they pull the wood part would come off, and the point would stay in. Where the bigger points, they could extract them out. Yeah, but they couldn't do it there.
How about that?
And of course, that would make a terrible. It'd make a terrible sore on you wherever.
Yeah, it
eventually
would never,
kill you.
Yeah, it would always fester. Okay.
Now, these points here, most of these are of the Paleo period, and those have got some good workmanship. You see that looks like a alligator's mouth there, Gar, and you can see how they notched those down in there.
Okay, now what was the notch down in there for? What was the purpose on that?
For hafting onto their stick. Let's say these would be spear points here.
Okay.
But they primarily is show pieces, ceremonial pieces. They wouldn't, I don't think, go to that much work to make one of them and then shoot it to somebody. But now these points here were deadly points.
Well,
they would use a muskrat tooth or a beaver tooth when they got down to pulling these little serrates out in there.
Well, you got an awful fine collection there. How long you been at this?
Well, I really haven't been active in it now for several years, but back years ago, before my kids got up any size, and after they got up, it was a family project out, hunting and collecting these things. So we had a wonderful time when my kids were small, just going out and exploring fields, good exercise too.
Mm-hmm. I think you said you found some here in town.
Yeah, I found them before this building here was built. Right along in here, they was on this ridge here and back on up from Carrygore Service Station up in there. I think they still find them up there in those gardens and things. And out toward the golf course is now, there was a big campsite in there on one of those hills there before they.
Okay, now there was no stream there or such, is there? Running through there?
No, but there was water, of course, before it was cleared up. You know, you can't tell what. They was down in that valley there was probably springs there then because of the timber and everything. As we cleared up the fields and things, the springs where we used to know when we were kids are no longer there anymore. Your water level table has dropped. But those campsites there could have been there, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. We don't know. Like we say, they didn't leave no written history. This is all we left behind. But it's really been a good hobby and everything. Like I say, I should have continued on with it, but the modern farming and discard done away with a lot of it. Back when we didn't have anything but horse-drawn equipment, you didn't damage it too much. But the tractor and the disc harrows.
I'd say walking along behind a mule, you'd see more and pick them up.
Yeah. And back when the creeks and things used to flood and get out of the banks and go down and cut a new channel, you could go down through there and you could find them. Up here in the Washley Cave, up here down that branch there, me and Kenny Huddleston used to find a lot down in just that dry creek bed where they washed out and eroded away. And of course they lived in that cave up our Washley Cave. I never did do any digging in there or anything like that. Never did, but a mighty little digging. But they found grave sites, burials in there, and artifacts with them. They nearly always buried part of their possessions with them.
Oh, but darn, that's something. I know I used to live up on the lake, and you'd have high water every year, and it'd wash out new artifacts of certain kinds. Geodes was really predominant up there, and you'd see new ones every year. And I'd say it's the same thing around.
Oh, yeah. Of course, you had mound builders. Now, there's one big mound out here this side of Monterey up there on Mr. Matheny's place there, but nobody's never examined it, anything. I hope if anybody ever does, it's some archaeologists, and they'll record everything. And they said there was one mound below the Birdstown Bridge down there, which is covered by water. But right in this area here, there wasn't any. They used those mounds for their, I don't know, rituals they had. They get up on them and dance and go through all their partying and everything they had, but that was the purpose of them. But they also, I think, buried their dead in them too.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, is there any way somebody can get started in this, that you'd have any suggestions to them?
I just go out and get permission from some landowner and start walking the plowed fields.
How do you see them? It's like finding four-leaf clovers. You got to have a knack for it sometimes. As
you do more hunting and get interested in it, it'll just come to you more.
See them.
Yeah, you can see them. Thing of it is, I've been fooled a few times myself. I've seen one off over maybe 20 feet away, and I could see that thing laying up there with a flute in it. Walk over and it'd just be a splinter or something they've knocked off of one. So your mind and your eyes will fool you sometimes. You get to want to see that thing so bad, you'll just see it over there.
Have you ever run across, say, a pile of maybe arrowheads where they've just culled them out? They'd be making them and break them, and I'd say they probably had a common place that they sat around and made them.
Yeah, now, there's a stone prairie where they got this stone right by, it's where Smithville's water plant, if you ever went from Sparta to Smithville, over that, after you cross the lake, that big green building right down the ridge from it is where they got their stone for their arrowheads and things like that, where they dug it out. It's in the banks there. I found it when we was working on that plant there.
Oh, okay.
That's the only one I ever run into is the Flint Quarry, where they got their...
Well, now, you could find actually piles of them?
Oh, yeah, where they piled it out. They graded it out. If the grain in that flint wasn't right, they just discarded it. They took the piece, and then they chipped it off, and they got it into a rough blank, and then took it with them. They didn't have as much rock to carry that way.
Okay.
And then they'd get their deer horn out, and they'd chip it and flake it into the point, like those there.
Yeah.
They supposedly they put a piece of bear skin or something, they patted it in their hand, and they had a deer horn stuff, and you can to pull a flake off this side here, you apply pressure down here.
Okay, you actually
and that flake goes down.
Yeah.
Then turn it over here, go this way, and I see that long, I don't know where the camera will pick it up or not, long parallel flakes. This flake here came out right there. This flake here came out here. And that one, let's see, that may have been the one. No, that wasn't. This one was one. See, this one comes in here and ties into this one. There and there.
That's big flakes on there.
They done that by compression. They probably hit that down with it, right like that, hard. And of course, that'd be a lot of pressure for a man to apply there to pull that off. But now on your smaller points, see right here. Those like that one there, they started with a piece and they put it down, the bear skin down there, and they held it and they turned it over like that. The bear skin protected their hand from the flakes, which would cut you just like glass.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a pretty one there too. That's kind of a multicolor.
I don't know how that thing, I don't know why it was in there. Didn't know it was in there till I got up here. Of course, there's a point off of one.
Well, Dempsey, is there anything else you can tell us about, say, the history on the Indians
Well, like I told you, the Indians through this area here was just a few isolated tribes. Big settlements was down in the Nashville area and east of here whenever the settlers come. And years gone by, there's had to be a lot of people lived here to leave as many projectile points and artifacts, which we don't know anything about. And any group of people, anybody that don't leave any written history, you just don't know too much about them. But us today in the throwaway age, if we didn't have any history, there wouldn't be anything left of us. That's a few thousand years from now.
I'll tell you what, if we didn't have written history, they'd wonder about all the bottle caps and
well, of course,
cans.
they'd deteriorate in a few years, and so there wouldn't be anything left of us, any history, any records of us. But the stone and stuff that they did use is still here.
Okay.
But like I said, modern agriculture, of course, has damaged lots of them out. But there's still places where you can find points and things. But most of them have been picked up out in fields where they've been cultivated for years. But still worth getting out there and getting a little exercise.
Just slimmer pickings, but they're still there.
Oh yes, you won't get out and find 250 points like we used to in a day in one field. Good point. You might find 4 or 5, and some of them, even pieces now. I don't know, that hadn't been broke there, but when it first started, if it was chipped or anything, we didn't pick it up. But as years went on and the pickings got slimmer, we got where we pick up half of one.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, you certainly got an interesting hobby, and I want to thank you for being up here with us tonight and telling us a little bit about the history of the Indians around here, which I didn't know much about. I've learned quite a bit tonight on this. And the tools, I don't know that I've ever seen the big tools like you have. I've seen a lot of arrowheads, but now these are quite unusual to me.
Well, I tried to pick out one of each one of them and bring it.
I'd say you've got quite an extensive collection at home, don't you?
I still have several of them. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being here tonight with us.
Well,
and I hope anyone out there that collects arrowheads has been able to relate with Dempsey, and anybody that doesn't collect them or like me, it's kind of intrigued with a little bit of history that we have here. And I'll tell you what, we'll see you later. I would like to thank everyone for watching tonight. We hope that you have enjoyed our magazine, and be sure and tune us in next time. We would also like to invite you to send us your comments and ideas for future shows. This is Jerry Stovall saying thank you and good night.